you can look and see whether that's who you are really. Do you need anything, including a tool? You know, I'm sure Ramana must have talked a little bit about the spiritual director with you. You know, it's another identity that shows up. There's this idea of me of a me that's in control of my spiritual growth.
Very clearly.
Yeah. So you can just, anytime that identification raises its head, just shine the flashlight of awareness on it and see what happens.
Say, who needs to control this by staying in presence?
Yeah, by staying in presence, basically you're saying, you're basically positing that somehow or another there's some time when you're not present. And of course your presence itself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Molly, thank you. Great report, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the microphone, yeah.
Bob, what really helped me before was what you said about what to do with memories, which Poonja-ji called the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
And why did he call it the graveyard, and what's the thing you can do with them?
Well, I thought it was really interesting, and it really made sense for him to call memory the graveyard. And he used to basically, he would say, you can spend your time here now with with life, you know, or you can go dig back into the graveyard and dig up all the dead bodies and play with them. And the choice is yours. But sometimes the mind gets drugged to the graveyard. You know, and something will happen in the present moment which will trigger latent tendencies that are tied to memories of similar incidents that happened in the past. You know, that are carried in the mind or in memory. And he's just, basically his advice was just don't go there. Just don't go there. The possibility now is you can, you know, the thing that we're trying to avoid is an unpleasant sensation. What happens is thoughts trigger sensations in the body. If we have a familiar set of sensations, enough that we had them long enough or often enough for them to be familiar, then we'll start calling them emotions rather than just sensations. So then an emotion like hate, anger, fear, greed, you know, all the 7 deadly sins, whatever, all of that is just basically being triggered. You know, it's an explanation that we're coming in words, in symbology, to explain that familiar set of bodily sensations. So if I say, oh, this is, I'm afraid, then the next sentence, you know, the explanation, oh, I'm afraid, because these sensations are arising, then the mind will come up with a story about the fear, and the fear, of course, is the first word in the story. You know, I'm afraid. The possibility, when each of these things arise, is you cut the story away from the sensation, and there again the mind will be saying, this is the same sensation that I had 20 years ago. And of course it isn't. It's a fresh, new sensation that's happening now, but it's being linked to the graveyard of memory by the story. And the story is, this is the same sensation. So the possibility is just to simply put the story aside, don't make the connection to the graveyard, and just experience what you're experiencing. Just feel it raw. Feel it absolutely raw. And I've worked with people who, you know, have been abused when they were younger, and things just came up to consciousness from the subconscious you were talking about. And when they finally did look and experience the sensations, I can remember one woman telling me, and I thought it was really telling, she said, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. We spend an awful lot of energy avoiding unpleasant sensations. It's a huge part of the survival mechanism. Now, I'm not saying go out and look for pain, but when it does come up, it's useful to be able to cut the loop and just be here now. Be here now is that which you cannot not be, experiencing what in truth can't be avoided, which is that which is happening now. Does it take a great deal of courage? Life is courage. You know, for a mouse to stick its head out of a mouse hole in the morning or whatever, you know, life is courage. So does that work for you, Mark, at all?
So you're saying it's the emotional attachment to the memory? Or the energy that comes, the old voice says, I know this. Mm-hmm. That Papa-ji would say is the graveyard. Because once in a while memory can be a good thing. Yeah?
Well, memories are wonderful. You know, I mean, it's just to let your memory give you your identification. See them for what they are. They're just latent impressions, you know, in the mind. But they're not happening now, as we perceive now in these bodies. You know, as time is this linear, seems to be this linear function. I've said in the past, and you know, it kind of now seems to be coming up again, that when the mind is identified with those latent impressions as if they're real, and now one more or less forgets who one is. In a way, there's the attention is all on this story that's trying to keep the bodily sensation from being too damaging, if it's a traumatic experience from the past. In truth, I can remember my mother when she was in the hospital, and this is the other side of the coin. She started losing a lot of her memories, and she was in a great state of grief because that which she thought made her up was disappearing. And sometimes it was very poignant to observe that process. It was, you know, kind of heart-wrenching in a way to see how sad she was and how much she was mourning the loss of what she considered herself to be. Now, I think in the Shakespearean play King Lear, the fool is this character that's in the play, and he is basically always making comments about what's going on with all the rest of the interactions in the play, between the characters in the play. And he speaks to being the fool, he can say whatever he wants and not be punished for it. So he's told the king, he said, nuncle, which I guess is a word for that they used back then. It's like uncle or whatever, but nuncle. If that were my fool, I'd have thee beaten. And King Lear says, well, how so? And the fool said, it's wise to become wise before one becomes old.